In the small town of Morningside, there stood an elegant old library made of stone walls and creaky wooden floors. Its windows were narrow and tall, allowing only slivers of daylight to slip through. The place always smelled perpetually of old pages and faint lemon-scented furniture polish. Generations had come and gone, borrowing dusty volumes and gripping tales, but most folks had overlooked the building's biggest secret. A ghostly sentinel roamed its aisles. Morningside's rumor mill whispered stories of the phantom librarian, a silent figure in a stiff collared blouse who floated with unearthly poise and demanded, and this was the crucial part, absolute silence. No joyful shrieks, no eureka outbursts, not even a clumsy sneeze was allowed without consequence. Legend claimed that she'd appear out of nowhere, press a spectral finger to her lips, and let out the most commanding shh anyone had ever heard. The hush was said to echo through the library's corridors, bouncing off bookshelves and smacking unwary visitors right in the ears. Anyone who dared violate the tranquility quickly realized they'd become the ghost's pet project. Over time, the local children turned the story into a humorous challenge. They would tiptoe into the reading room, stifle their giggles behind thick volumes, and try to catch a glimpse of her. One boy even claimed he saw the ghost drift through a bookshelf while glaring at him for the monstrous offense of zipping his backpack too loudly. Of course, it wasn't just kids. Adults also sometimes got spooked. A councilwoman was once so startled by an unexpected "eesh" that she dropped a whole armload of tax manuals onto her foot, ensuring she had a limp for a week. Yet no one had any real proof of the phantom librarian's existence. Only hushed whispers, scattered anecdotes, and the occasional squeak of a cart with no hands pushing it. Still, the rumors thrived. Some people insisted they felt cold drafts in the middle of summer in the far corners of the library. Others swore on their prized family Bibles that they heard scraping sounds at closing time, as if unseen nails were clawing across the floor. One day, a group of local teens snuck in a digital recorder, hoping to catch the ghost's hush on tape for their school project. Instead of picking up a disembodied shish, the device recorded them rummaging through the stacks, giggling mercilessly, and squeaking their shoes in unsubtle ways. When the teens reviewed their audio, they found the last phrase repeated on the reel, "Be quiet or else," followed by a squeal of static. It was enough to freak them out, but also enough to keep them bragging to terrified younger siblings about their harrowing encounter, raising the library's haunted profile to near legendary status. Meanwhile, Marianne Pilkington, the new head librarian, had just arrived from a bustling city. She was a practical-minded woman who believed in good lighting, well-organized sections, and an atmosphere that encouraged curiosity. Ghosts were not on her agenda. On her first day, she dismissed all the whispered warnings that the old building had unique guardians as nothing but local folklore. She'd managed bigger libraries than this, ones with far more colorful clientele who yelled across reading rooms or snored so loudly during story hour that toddlers clapped in delight. She saw Morningside's library as a charming step back in time, where the tallest drama might be someone bringing a dog-eared copy later. She had no idea she'd soon be locking eyes or trying to with a formidable presence from the beyond. Marianne spent her first few weeks tidying up. She updated the catalog system and replaced wobbly chairs, firmly believing no ghost was necessary for library discipline. Her first sense that something was truly off arrived during a Monday afternoon story circle with the local kindergarten. She had taped colorful pictures of ducks and kittens to a board and was reading a sing-song rhyme about noisy farm animals. The kids were enthralled until a sudden gust of icy wind rustled the pages, sending her storybook fluttering onto the floor. Shh! A faint hiss came from behind the bookshelf nearest the group, startling everyone. Marianne picked up the book, perplexed, because she was the only librarian on duty and no other adult was allowed to hush her own story hour. The children looked at each other with wide eyes. One boy tried to keep from crying out, but in his panic he squeaked, "Mommy!" And again, right on cue, that spectral shh traveled across the room. The kids erupted into startled squeals. Before Marianne could comfort them, the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees, and she felt a rippling in the hair on her neck. In the space of a blink, a figure took form amid the swirling dust motes. An old-fashioned blouse with lacy sleeves, braided hair pinned in a perfectly round bun, half spectacles perched precariously on the tip of her nose, the ghostly entity pressed a long, transparent finger to her lips. "Shh!" she barked. Chaos ensued. There was a collective scream of small children, which, ironically, was the absolute worst offense in terms of library noise. The spectral librarian's expression hardened. She swooped toward the children with an alarming speed, half glowing, half gliding above the worn carpet. One little girl began to wail. Marianne thumped into the bookshelf in an attempt to intercept the spirit, toppling a row of battered fairy tale anthologies in the process. Each time a child screamed in terror, the ghostly figure seemed more agitated, hissing and shushing with fervent determination, as though defending the sacred hush of the library's atmosphere. The presence of so many high-pitched yells was an attack on her prime mission. She hovered ominously, her intangible bun bobbing in indignation. Realizing her carefully planned story circle had turned into a haunted house attraction, Marianne scrambled to get the children out. One by one, she ushered them past the checkout desk and deposited them into a safe corridor, ignoring the offended spirits still swirling in the reading room behind them. The meltdown level was intense. Kids clutched her skirt, tears streaking their cheeks, hearts thudding as if they'd just escaped a monster. Marianne's own heart pounded like a snare drum. By the time she corralled them all, she was out of breath and absolutely furious. Once the children were safely with waiting parents, who now demanded an explanation, Marianne found herself struggling to hold on to her composure. A part of her wanted to dismiss the incident as mass hysteria or special effects gone wrong. But she had seen that ghostly figure as clearly as her own reflection in the library windows. She had witnessed those pale fingertips pressing lips in a condescending hush, had heard the echo of that stern shh, rattling her eardrums. She realized she needed to figure this out, and quickly. After sending the families home with a promise of a rescheduled story time, Marianne decided to investigate the legend of the Phantom Librarian in earnest. She took out the old staff ledgers stored in the cramped archives below the library. Cobwebs brushed her cheeks as she flipped through brittle pages documenting librarians dating back over a century. She found mention of a stern woman named Cordelia Bramble who had worked there around 1910. Miss Bramble apparently oversaw the library with an iron fist. One line in the ledger read, "Children must remain silent or face Miss Bramble's dreaded shush." Another note mentioned her sudden and unexplained death in 1919, rumored to have happened inside the library after hours. This was the first real clue that the current poltergeist might be Cordelia herself, forever bound to keep the library as quiet as possible. Disturbed but determined, Marianne devised a straightforward plan. She would confront Cordelia's spirit and negotiate a peace treaty. She reasoned that even a ghost might be reasoned with, as the library today served children, teens, and talkative seniors who liked reading clubs. The goal wasn't to invite bedlam into the building, but complete and utter silence had no place in a modern library. She rehearsed what she might say. "Excuse me, Miss Bramble," she imagined explaining. "We have new policies and a more relaxed approach. Could you please not terrify patrons half to death?" Her first attempt at contact was comedic. One evening after closing, she turned the lights low and recited, "Miss Bramble, if you're here, show yourself." The overhead fluorescent tubes flickered, revealing faint dust swirling in the gloom. There was a hush, as though the entire building held its breath. Then a stack of library guides slid off the main counter and clattered to the floor. Marianne stooped to pick them up, heart thumping in her throat. "Is that you?" she whispered nervously. "I'd like to talk." Thwack. The bulletin board pinned to the wall fell, scattering tacked-up announcements on upcoming book sales. Shuff. A breeze of ice-cold air snaked around Marianne, slicing through the warm building as though it were winter. She turned slowly, scanning for any glimpse of the figure, but saw only shadows. "Miss Bramble?" she called timidly. "I'm the new head librarian." No response. "I respect your dedication to quiet, but things have changed. Could we maybe discuss how to compromise?" She felt silly trying to reason with air. But she pressed on, voice rising involuntarily. "We have story hours now. happily noisy reading clubs for seniors, even some yoga classes with a little bit of chanting. Suddenly behind her, a brisk swirl of movement materialized into that unmistakable silhouette. The ghost hovered, arms folded, half-moon spectacles glinting with supernatural light. She gazed at Marianne sternly, as though punishing her with a look for so many offenses at once. Marianne gulped, noticing the ghost's lips quivering, already prepared to produce a bone-chilling hush. Instead, the spirit simply said, "Talking is for playgrounds, laughter is for open fields. The library is the holy temple of silence." Marianne's mouth fell open. "Well, we do have designated reading rooms for discussion," she managed. "We have a teen group that writes poems and shares out loud, and we have some friendly gatherings." "No!" The ghost's voice was no longer just a hiss. It reverberated with quiet power. Her hair seemed to tremble in its strict bun. "Only hushed whispers are allowed. Whispers if absolutely necessary," she paused, as if measuring Marianne's resolve. "And minimal foot shuffling, too." The negotiation session went about as smoothly as one might expect when dealing with a century-old apparition. Each time Marianne suggested a library activity that required conversation, like a writing workshop or a tutor's meetup, the ghost shook her head in silent refusal. Books rarely waver on their content, and so the phantom librarian rarely budged on her stance. Eventually, Marianne gave up for the night, promising she'd do her best to keep the library volume at a tolerable level while formulating a better plan to appease Miss Bramble. Cordelia simply vanished into the dark corners of the shelving, presumably satisfied or at least temporarily pacified. Over the next few days, Marianne tried to enforce a soft voices please policy. She posted polite signs. She asked staff to keep close watch on overly chatty patrons. She even sacrificed her beloved cappuccino machine for fear the whirring froth noise might summon the spirit's wrath. Initially, it seemed to work. The library was calmer. But at the first sign of an enthusiastic teacher-librarian book club, the phantom librarian emerged with her strong disapproval. A particularly charismatic educator burst into laughter over a funny anecdote, and within seconds, a swirl of dust heralded the arrival of Miss Bramble. The teacher felt a chill pass her shoulder before hearing that dreaded hush. And it wasn't a subtle hush. It had a disembodied, reverberating quality like someone had stomped on an echo pedal in an empty cathedral. The teacher yelped, stumbled backward, and then apologized repeatedly, as if to avoid the poltergeist vengeance. Marianne sighed, picking up a toppled potted plant, annoyed that the spirit's sense of comedic timing aligned so perfectly with every outbreak of noise. Word spread quickly among the library goers. Some found it terrifying, others found it hilarious, and a select few found it thrilling. Like a game, to see which of them could provoke the phantom librarian's presence and earn the ultimate hush. Teenagers started turning the place into a ghost hunting destination, daring each other to sneeze louder than was courteous or to drop textbooks with a bang to see if the ghost would appear. Naturally, the phantom librarian did not disappoint, unleashing her swirling entrance whenever noise levels peaked. She would appear behind them, hands clasped in dismay, releasing an apocalyptic shh, clicking us in every direction. It became something of a local phenomenon, with people traveling from neighboring towns to experience the Shush Patrol themselves. Marianne launched a campaign to counter the circus-like atmosphere. She decorated the library with signs reading, "Please, keep your voice down. Our phantom librarian insists," illustrating them with whimsical ghost cartoons. She gave out earplugs for free at the front desk. She created extra quiet zones for the truly timid, complete with plush chairs and no loud noises allowed disclaimers. The day she introduced these zones, the temperature stayed stable, no dread chills swept the aisles, and Miss Bramble remained conspicuously absent. It gave Marianne hope that maybe, just maybe, the ghost appreciated the newfound respect for hush. Or perhaps Cordelia was merely biding her time. Despite these efforts, comedic incidents continued. An older gentleman with a hearing aid exclaimed he couldn't hear anything and turned his device's volume way up, which ironically emitted a high-pitched feedback noise. He apologized profusely after the phantom librarian zoomed toward him, brandishing that stern index finger over her spectral lips. A mother and toddler entered the library, with the toddler spontaneously bursting into a squeaky version of The Wheels on the Bus and sending the ghost spinning out of a bookshelf in a flurry of disapproval. The mother rushed her child outside, while Miss Bramble hovered in exasperation, as if unsure whether to chase them down the block or let them go in peace. The comedic apex occurred on a Saturday afternoon. The local magician, known as Chester the Marvelous, had volunteered to do a small demonstration in the children's section. He was the type of performer who thrived on ta-da exclamations, big applause, and uncontained laughter. Obviously, such a show in a haunted library was doomed from the start. With about 20 children gathered, Chester was halfway through his act when he pulled a bright bunch of flowers from his sleeve and declared, "Abracadabra," in a booming voice. The children squealed with delight. That was Miss Bramble's green light. She appeared like an outraged hostess discovering a surprise party in her living room. The overhead lights flickered, electric bulbs flaring in protest. Chester, ever the showman, decided to incorporate the ghost into his act. "Look, everyone," he said, "even the library has a ghostly assistant for my illusions. Ta-da!" He bowed with a flourish, and the kids roared with laughter. The phantom librarian let out her trademark hush once, then again, each time more insistent. Books began flipping open and slamming shut on their own. The children gasped, unsure if this was real magic or a staged performance. Chester, emboldened, told them, "Amazing illusions, folks, courtesy of the library." That's when a flying dictionary soared off a high shelf, nearly knocking the top hat off Chester's head. He shrieked, dropping the flowers and his wand, which clattered onto the tiled floor. The children, convinced they were part of an interactive ghost spectacle, applauded wildly, cheering at every supernatural spectacle. Furious that her hushes had been ignored, Miss Bramble soared to the center of the room, commanding everyone's attention. Shelves rattled as though caught in an earthquake. The roar of the children's excitement mingled with the chaotic noise. Chester scrambled away, stammering apologies, trying to usher the kids to the exit. In that moment, Marianne arrived on the scene, glancing from the flying dictionary to the cowering magician to the enthralled children. Without hesitation, she stepped forward with a determined stride and shouted rather ironically, "Cordelia Bramble, enough!" The swirling air stilled, and every book fluttering mid-air dropped with a soft thud. The children fell silent, their eyes shifting between Marianne and the transparent figure. The ghost turned her gaze slowly. Marianne could see sadness in those spectral eyes, as if the spirit realized how out of control she had become. Their stare felt like an entire conversation. Then, quietly, Marianne uttered, "We remember and respect your rules, but the library is for everyone. It isn't meant to be a silent tomb." She paused, taking a breath. "People come here to learn, to share ideas, to grow. We can treasure quiet study, but laughter and chatter have a respectful place." A whoosh, one not forced by supernatural means, fell upon the group. The kids, the magician, even the staff looked around in uneasy amazement. Miss Bramble raised a hand as if to produce another massive hush, but her expression softened and her hand lowered. She hovered, no longer swirling or raging, just quietly regarding Marianne and the 36 wide-eyed individuals. "We can have designated times for hush," Marianne said, voice calmer now, "and designated times for a bit of friendly noise. Please, let us find balance." The ghost gently closed her eyes, bowing her head in a kind of acceptance. She slowly drifted backward, fading from view. The overhead lights steadied, and a wave of relief rippled through the crowd. Chester exhaled in obvious gratitude, picking up his battered wand. The children broke into spontaneous applause, tentative at first, as if they expected a dictionary to whack them, but gradually more confident. Marianne's shoulders sagged in exhaustion. That night, the library felt different, as though a hush had finally settled into its rightful place, not enforced by fear, but by respect. Over the next few days, Marianne instituted the new quiet hours and family fun hours, indicated by large, colorful signs near the entrance and around the library. She scheduled daily reading sessions in quieter corners, encouraging polite whispering if needed, while the lively children's area was open for normal conversation and the occasional squeal of excitement. For a while, staff and patrons alike waited for the ghost to intervene, anticipating the dreaded hush. But Miss Bramble did not manifest each time someone giggled or coughed. On rare occasions, the temperature dipped or a light flickered, but it was a gentle reminder rather than a scolding. The library had found an equilibrium. News traveled fast. Once the teens realized no more dramatic poltergeist appearances were guaranteed, they returned to normal usage, leaving behind their sneeze challenges. The older gentleman, assured that he wouldn't be ambushed by a dictionary, came back to read his newspapers in contented peace. The mother, with the toddler, popped in for a new board book, greeting Marianne with a giggle about hoping the ghost doesn't mind. Marianne only smiled, tapping the sign that read, Family Fun Hours. She later paused in the aisle, quietly thanking Cordelia Bramble, wherever she might be, for easing up on her ironclad rule. In some ways, Marianne felt that Miss Bramble had become an unseen library ally, maintaining order without suffocating spontaneity. And yet, comedic glimpses of the phantom librarian persisted. If a teenager dared blast music from a phone speaker, the screen would inexplicably flicker and freeze until the volume lowered. If someone popped gum too loudly in the reference section, they might feel a sudden chill swirl around their head, urging them to quiet down. Staff occasionally reported hearing a faint but unmistakable shh drifting through the building at closing time, as though Miss Bramble was making her last rounds of the day. Everyone responded by smiling knowingly, taking it as a playful nudge rather than a looming threat. Indeed, Miss Bramble's ghost, once a terror, had become something of a beloved institution herself, a spectral caretaker who popped up when the library's hush was at risk of being drowned by chaos. Morningside's residents swapped comedic anecdotes. I was talking too loudly on the phone and the call dropped suddenly. Must have been Miss Bramble. Or, my dog barked outside the front doors and I swear the door handle rattled in disapproval. The ghost had become the stuff of gentle jokes rather than hair-raising nightmares. Marianne came to realize that Cordelia Bramble's passion was rooted not in cruelty, but in reverence for knowledge and the meditative silence in which it thrived. Over time, the building's softly coexisting energies of hush and mild chatter seemed to honor both the living and the departed caretaker. Patrons took a certain pride in following the unspoken code. Don't get too loud, or the phantom librarian might slip through a wall and hush you to next Tuesday. This playful rule became an ongoing inside joke, forging an odd sort of camaraderie among library goers. Of course, it wasn't always perfect. On especially busy days, voices rose, books thumped, children squealed, but the memory of the Shush Patrol's comedic scoldings kept volume from escalating into pandemonium. Marianne and her staff effectively balanced modern library life with a historic, ghostly oversight. And whenever a newcomer asked, "Is it true this place has a ghost librarian?" Marianne would let a mischievous smile curl her lips and respond, "Oh, she's here." She just loves it best when folks respect the hush. The following month, at the unveiling of a new reading nook for children, Marianne stood before a small crowd thanking sponsors and local volunteers. She cleared her throat, scanning the cheerful faces, the bright pictures of animals plastered on the wall, and the cozy beanbags that practically invited kids to cuddle up with a good book. She could almost sense Miss Bramble hovering invisibly in an upper corner, watching over them. Marianne ended her speech with a slight grin. Now, let's all remember to enjoy reading, quietly or else. A ripple of laughter spread through the audience, followed by a respectful silence. In that good-natured hush, if one listened closely, you could hear a faint, satisfied shh drifting overhead. Cordelia Bramble's approval at last.